of interest and action at the local game store. And then for about 15, 16 months now, it's been pretty quiet. So that was surprising for me to hear, because I know that the 40K kits are selling. People are still buying it and painting,
Yeah.
but maybe they're not really playing too much.
Well, yeah, this is the question. Are they playing 40K? Or are they playing, one-page rules or
That's what he said.
something
He's like,
else?
oh, when people get tired of the Games Workshop rules, they might turn to one page. That's literally what he said to me. The guy who was stocking the 40K rule books. So
And we'll get into it. So,
yeah,
yeah, like, what have you been playing? I mean, you've been playing Old World, I guess, and painting Old World.
I've been painting it, but campaign starts next weekend. So I'm pretty
Next
amped for that.
weekend.
Starting off with 500 points, 500 PTs. Then we're going to do 250 each session, like kind of an escalation league sort of thing, escalation
Okay, yeah.
campaign. But the campaign organizers got some really cool stuff that they're coming up with. Like, apparently the second round mission is going to be like a kind of urban warfare sort of thing. So there's going to be a lot of buildings on
Okay.
the table, and I think 2 players per side. So that'll be really cool. That'll be something that's pretty thrilling and a little bit different. I think there's some good creativity going on. So yeah. I played that, and 2 weeks ago I played 10th edition regular game,
Yeah.
full game for the first time ever. And I don't know, Chris, if you want to get into that, but it was okay. It was okay. You know,
Yeah, we can
it,
talk. We can talk it because I think there's
yeah,
a vibe out there, and this. I mean, that'll lead us into the episode. But like, yeah, where's your gut with 10th? Like,
yeah. I played it. I said it was okay, and honestly, I kind of want to play it again. Um,
yeah,
I was like, huh, there were some kind of cool things there. Some things did move very fast, other things had issues. So I would definitely be up for playing another game at like 1,000 point level. I think, if you go up to 2,000, it's just gonna take forever. It's gonna be a grind. But I think for smaller point scales, pretty good. So boarding
yeah.
actions would be pretty fun too. I want to play boarding actions because I got the little terrain thing as well for that.
Mm.
So that'd be a really good way to just play on a kitchen table 40K. So I've previously said on the show that I thought 10th Ed, without really playing it, had too many special rules, and that is also what I felt playing it. But that could just be kind of confirmation bias. As opposed
Yeah,
to the real deal. Maybe if I played it more, I would say like, oh no, this is actually like the right level. Um, but just starting off as an introductory game using the full rules, there were a lot of moving parts: primary objective, secondary objective. I think there's these gambits. We didn't pull any of those, and of course all the special rules of each individual unit interacting, and some units
don't
can have up to like 6 special rules or something. It's crazy.
don't some of the objectives also change turn to turn?
Yeah, you can change your secondaries if you want to.
Right.
I did not mess around with that because really just wanted to learn the basic mechanics. My friend was going to
Yeah.
be going to a narrative tournament, which he actually just played in last weekend, had a great time. Um, so we wanted to focus on the core rules, and I didn't really mess around with those interactions too much. Uh, the complaints that a lot of the game is standing on circles to collect objective points. For me, that wasn't so much the case, but I also had 3 like kind of troop units. I was playing Dark Eldar, so I had my raiders and Cavalite warriors inside of them. So they're just flying around capturing objectives, that sort of thing, and then blasting and that kind of thing. I think if you didn't have many troops and you had a lot more like elite units, yeah, you'd have to have some of them just kind of sitting on objectives. Maybe they would be like artillery camped back there, that sort of thing. So that could definitely
Yeah.
affect the game. But it's kind of
Mm.
weird too, because I'm more of a third edition kind of guy,
Yeah.
and they made the table a little bit smaller.
Yeah.
All the movements are larger, and also a lot of the miniatures are larger. So you get stuck into combat a lot faster, which I think is cool for a lot of people. Because I come from that more old school background with it, I think that it kind of eliminates the maneuvering aspect and positioning that could be
Yeah,
crucial in older editions. Because let's say you're playing second edition, Chris. Remember,
yeah,
movement
yeah.
4, movement 5 for your guys, like
It
they're
was a
super
foot
slow.
slog. Yeah,
Indeed, yeah. So if you had your troops out of position, basically, they could be out of the game almost and be ineffective. So that's largely been eliminated. My friend maneuvered his was it the Immolator? It's the Sisters of Battle tank with
yeah,
the multi guns on it. One side of the board to the other, basically, long ways, and it wasn't really a inhibition to them. So, that's definitely a change that exists. Maybe if we had more terrain, that sort of thing, then positioning could be a bit more crucial and important. But again, as we were talking about last time, the terrain rules are a bit more um, the zone terrain aspects kind of come into play, so they don't block line of sight in the same manner that they might have in the past. Um,
yeah.
so I definitely I'm cool with playing it again, but I am also trying to think about ways to kind of streamline the experience more, because there's just a lot of moving parts that I don't think are like totally necessary. To be honest,
Such as, what do you think is not necessary in there?
I actually think that you could really streamline the mission objectives.
Yeah,
You know, this whole like having changing secondaries and your the primary makes sense, right? There should be a reason for people to be on this battlefield, whether it be capturing a particular objective, holding certain things for a narrative reason, assassination, and also makes sense to maybe have each side having a different objective. But the shifting secondaries, I kind of feel like is unnecessary, and the victory point aspect to it, I also think is kind of a construct that I don't think is necessary. I understand why they have it, because they want to give you that kind of competitive feel where you say like, all right,
mm,
these people are scoring points. All right, now the other side's scoring points. Are they going to be able to get ahead of the opponent or not? Kind of like a sports game, right? You can
yeah,
definitely,
yeah.
for that kind of spectator aspect, it's pretty important. But from just a wargamer feel, I don't think it's totally necessary. Maybe some games, some missions, you need to have a kind of some sort of a score tracker, but I don't think you
Mm,
need to have that for every single mission. So that's just
interesting.
kind of what I felt and what I've been thinking about the last 2 weeks. And
Yeah, I mean, I was talking
I,
to
yeah,
Mark about it and his experiences of it, and he's been playing uh he's been playing more Horus Heresy as a
ooh,
result, because 10th just doesn't gel. Horus Heresy is essentially, what, 6th, 7th edition with
it's
polish
streamlined seventh edition with
and a bit more reactive, so units have reactions in there as well.
sure,
Um,
sure,
but apparently, it just seems to, for his mind, it works well. There's something, and again, like just from you watch YouTube's, you listen to certain things and stuff, and there just seems to be this kind of like, the vibe I'm getting out there is that there's an exhaustion to people exhausted by 10th edition in multiple ways. One, as we've already said multiple times, is the rules churn, where you just can't keep up with which, if you're playing rather casually, it's, you don't have to play the latest rules and everything, but still, if you're going to find opponents to play casually, they're, even if they're playing casually, they're still going to want to play the latest version of the rules, because you
yeah,
can't keep all these different rule system or variants of a rule system in your head. You just want to know the latest iteration of it.
absolutely, absolutely,
And I
yeah.
think the other thing is the buckets of D6, like, with the rolls to hit, rolls to wound, rolls to save, with re-rolling ones or re-rolling this and that and exploding dice, etc. That it's it's a lot going on with a lot of dice rolls for just like what could be, which is for one shot, one, well, I say one shot, one round of shooting.
Mhm.
Um yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting remark about re-rolling, because that was something they said they were going to try to resolve in this edition. Reduce the amount of re-rolls, and it feels
Yeah.
like I didn't play ninth, but it feels like there's an incredible amount of re-rolling in this edition. What I think they did do is the reroll ones and reroll twos that they had in the previous edition. That has gone away for the most part. That's been reduced, and instead they just have just straight rerolls, reroll everything that you need to reroll, which could make it a little bit faster. You just grab all the things that you need to reroll rather than cherry picking out the ones, for
Hmm.
example. But yeah, to me it seems like just rerolls everywhere, which was slow. It was frankly
Yeah,
pretty slow. I think about half of the dice rolled in our game were re-rolled, which is
hmm.
absurd to me. That
That is
seems just
crazy.
crazy. Yeah.
That is really mental.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh wow. I mean, it's so that's it's such a different vibe to like. So I've played now a few games of Mark IV Warmachine. Um, I've run a few demos, or I've played an actual regular game. I've got another game coming up this Wednesday, but it still feels quite just. It just feels like a good system, and it's still. And what you were saying about maneuverability, um,
Hmm.
and I think that's the same. There's some of the same issues in like I think 40k and Age of Sigmar have the same issue with with movement of things. It's like you slap down big wadges of troops, right? Or you move them, or they teleport into position, whatever, and then they're going to get
Yeah.
bogged down into combat, or they're shooting, and eventually get bogged down into combat. But then, essentially, that nothing really moves from that position much more, other than you bring more of them into the fight as you pile in,
Yeah.
right?
So you get the fur ball in the middle, which
Yeah,
is a effect I've seen a lot in Age of Sigmar. Um, yeah, when we played 10th, we had kind of a bifurcation. Like my
hmm
Dark Eldar went on both flanks, basically, and then he countered on both flanks. So the middle was actually fairly empty. But again, the fast movement kind of made that not a major issue for him to recover from.
yeah,
So yeah, it's pretty weird. We'll talk about Warmachine in a second, but as I mentioned to you, I was talking to the guy at the game store, and kind of a young buck, really friendly fellow at the
yeah,
Hobby Bunker in Wakefield, Massachusetts. Check it out. And he was telling me, I mentioned that I just played 10th edition. He's like, "Oh, hey, how was it?" I said it was okay. He's like, "Oh, okay." And we're talking a little bit, and I mentioned that we were going to be playing Old World on the 40k day, and I was kind of
yeah.
surprised. Like usually it's I thought it was really packed then. He said, "No, uh, 40k kind of dropped off after Labor Day. I
Wow.
want to say after Labor Day 2023. So that means that 10th came out. There was maybe like 2-3 months of interest and action at the local game store, and then for about 15-16 months now, it's been pretty quiet. So that was surprising for me to hear because I know that the 40k kits are selling. People are still buying it and painting,
Yeah.
but maybe they're not really playing too much.
Well, yeah, this is the question. Are they playing 40k, or are they playing, one page rules, or
That's what he said.
something
He's like,
else?
oh, when people get tired of the Games Workshop rules, they might turn to one page. That's literally what he said to me. The guy who was stocking the 40k rule books. So it's an interesting
Yeah.
situation, certainly, and
And
it Games
yeah.
Workshop won't make money off of rules if people aren't playing them. But if they still like the miniatures and are purchasing those, then they probably don't really care if people are playing other games.
Yeah, exactly. So long as they get to sell the models, I think that's the main thing with GW. I think as long as they
Sure.
sell models, but that is their main market. It's not actually selling the games. We know that they say that. Um,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's. I need to read one page rules again and get a greater feel for it. I think it has an alternating activation system, so you move a unit and then your opponent moves a unit back and forth like that. So that might make for a
Mm.
much more dynamic game. Um,
It could. It could.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Whereas like
Yeah.
War Machine, I've been finding quite again, it's coming back to those interesting like yeah, you can play. Because obviously in some respects I'm still kind of getting other people to learn the game, so we've not been playing full scenarios where you're playing for objectives. We're just been playing cast to kill, but the same principle applies for how with respect to objectives, because there are three types of objectives in in Warmachine missions generally, there's the large base 50 millimeter objectives, which means they can be claimed by warjacks and bigger, and by a warcaster. Then there's the 40 millimeter ones, which can only be claimed by units and a warcaster. And then you've got the
Oh,
30 millimeter flag objectives, and those can only be claimed by a warcaster or a solo. So certain objectives can only be scored by certain types of units.
okay. And our flags, is it for like capture the flag in some scenarios where they have to move the
Maybe I
flag
think they
somewhere?
just call them
Okay.
flags because they're on a small base, and you can
Oh, okay.
easily rep it that way. So I find that quite interesting because it means then you can't win the game by relying on one particular type of troop or one particular type of tactic. It makes your warcaster quite important for point scoring because they can they're more rapidly able to move into position and claim something generally because they're a singular model. um, it makes them quite an important kind of piece because of that importance on scoring.
Hmm.
And then the thing which strikes me about Warmachine versus, say, the idea of the way you see kind of like 40k and Age of Sigmar maybe play out is rather than just things slamming into each other and then just kind of there's a ruck and it's a ruck over an objective or near
Yep.
an objective. I feel with Warmachine there's definitely more movement shenanigans going on, like, and you'll be looking for ways to pull that off where you're like, I want to move that warjack off the objective, so what have I got that can do that? And that you look at um your arsenal of options. You might go, right, well, I could have my other warjack slam, do a barrel charge into it and slam it off the objective. That's a pretty good tactic. Or you might have a weapon that can do a pull and pull it off the objective, or you've got,
Hmm. Yep.
say, a spell or a weapon that might do pushbacks and so forth. And that type of thing, seeing that play out with certain tactics, was like, I find quite refreshing. And I don't think the only games where I feel like in the Games Workshop repertoire that have that kind of same feel of movement shenanigans are Warcry, because Warcry also
Sure. Yeah.
has you can trigger abilities that do pushes, or you can do uh or they might do pulls. But again, there aren't many in the game that do that. Um or uh it's Necromunda, where again, you've got like um you'll have like shotguns doing knockback, or you've got harpoon weapons, or
Hmm.
you basically you've got knockback or harpoon weapons that pull models closer to you. And that's interesting because those two games, I really feel like positioning is really important in such a way, like you do want
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
kind of like to get to an objective, to push someone off an objective, to pull them off the terrain or something like that. And similarly, I think Warmachine still has that. It's always had that. And it's just generally been really good fun to play. Um,
Yeah.
again,
Let's talk a little bit about Warmachine. Gameplay seems like Mark IV has been really good. Really good
yeah,
gameplay, really good development. Kind of hitting the reset button does allow these new factions to come up and also kind of go back to basics, basically back to their core gameplay philosophy without having too much extraneous stuff. I really like that. But we had a big year for it, 2023, because Mark IV came out. 2024 because Steamforge Games took over. 2025, where do we think that Warmachine's going to be going? Because
oh,
I mean, it's really interesting to hear about the resurgence around you uh, over in the UK because I can't get the starter set.
the Star Set
I was
sold
talking
out
to
everywhere, basically.
I was it sold out, but also my LGS was not interested in getting it. They were like, "Hey, we've got these Mark IV 3D printed boxes, from when it was released. No one's touched them. You want to buy those?" And I'm like, I kind of want the starter set. I like the hips. I know how to work with it.
Yeah, But the thing is, right? The
Yeah,
so which if they've got there's kind of like three different ways you can get started with Warmachine in a way.
sure.
If you don't know what you're doing, you're completely new to it, then the new hips is the nicest way to do it because it's hard
Yeah,
plastic. It's easy to work with. And I will say, yeah, I think it would have been better if it had tokens in there and dice.
sure.
But
Yeah.
also, you know, on the flip side is if you've gone into a shop, right, and you've gone, I want to play Warmachine, I want to buy the starter set. And the likelihood in this day and age is you've mostly bought it from a shop that also sells dice. You only need d6s, and you can mostly source tokens because there are so many tokens for games to supplement other games like Magic the Gathering, right? So I
Mhm.
think initially the choice was to not include those elements, those components in the box. A for simplicity of packing, and B because you can get most of that stuff cheaper, like as third party pieces, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. We're kind of moving to a different subject where we're talking about the contents of that box.
Yeah,
I have heard of some people complaining that it's just miniatures and that's it. Um, and yes, I understand. Do they really need to put in a little ruler? Do they need to put in a little dice? I did like that with the older,
yeah,
I think Mark II and Mark III starters that they had
yeah.
because those are being sold in bookstores and stuff. At least here in the United States, you could pick up that stuff from like a Barnes and Noble, for example. So it definitely made sense there. I think the lack of inclusion of a printed rule book is
Yeah,
interesting to me because as a result, I just heard about this and I was like, oh, I should just go check out their app then. Apparently, if the rules are on there, so it got me to download it and get to see some of the other stuff. So I think that is a pretty good advantage. I
and
think
the app
having
is
just like a
very good.
little, it is. I'm actually pretty impressed with the app. Not gonna lie, it's actually pretty rad. Um, I do feel like the inclusion of just like similar to what they used to have, just like basically a one-page sheet with the real basic rules on it, would have been good to have.
Yeah,
Especially if it's just like, hey, here's the starter rules right here. Now download the app. Here's that QR code, and you can get the full rules. Boom, right here, as well as make your army list and stuff. That I think would have been pretty good. But
but yeah, your
ultimately,
way.
not too worried
Sorry, yeah,
about it.
yeah, I wouldn't worry too much. And to get started, like I said, there's actually kind of a few ways. So you've got your the starter set. You've got the battle boxes, which are kind of like a warcaster and two warjacks generally. And then you've got the command cadres. Let me just have a look at what Steam. I can't remember what's in. So because the starter set is essentially two command cadres for Kador and
Hmm.
Signar, meaning even if you go, oh, I don't quite like Signar or Kador, right? But you like Crix, you could buy. It's going to cost a bit more, obviously, because it's the resin. But with Crix, you can buy the Crix command starter, and that again has a Warcaster, a solo, a character unit, and a character warjack. So it's the equivalent. For Signar, is there a did they do a pre-existing one? Yeah, there is one. It's the or are there two? Let me just check. There
Hmm.
is one. It's the command cadre for um for the Stormforge army. So that
Okay.
is 80 quid. And again, you've got a Warcaster, character Warjack, which is the Borealis, a character unit, which are the Storm Callers, some solo, and a unit of like Storm, Electro kind of
Yeah.
dudes.
These are the 3D printed models
And
that
that's all
made
three
these new
3D
hips.
printed resin, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
So, you can get the thing is you can get started in it in multiple ways. And again, even with the starter battle box, which you can't get. Maybe you can't get that anymore because of the way they've changed things. Oh no, you can. There you go. Battle group. That's 60 quid and gets you like two warjacks and a warcaster. but all of those are viable ways of playing the game. First off, and also each one of those. So, say if you were playing Signar, you got the plastic starter set. Okay, then you get the battle
Yeah.
box. Great, and then you go. I might get the other command cadre. Okay, fine. Or you get then the core army expansion. The point is that every step away along the way adds some more warjacks and a warcaster, and that means every one of those core purchases means you've got a different way of playing your army, because your army will have different synergies and tactics because you've got a different warcaster, because that
Right.
is the
Right.
they're basically the integral flavor of the art of how you build your army within a particular faction. Whereas I don't know, I mean, from your experience of Warhammer 40,000, like building your Drakari army, does the choice of who your commander is, does it drastically change the options available for your army?
No.
And does it
Uh,
change
so
drastically any
the
tactics or
big thing,
synergies?
no, it doesn't. The big thing with 40k 10th is that they have those detachments now, and
Yeah.
they have the army special rules, the detachment special rules. So it's the detachment that usually would have that kind of effect. But overall, I don't think the detachment causes really big changes. And of
Mm.
course, some armies, such as the Dark Eldar, only have one detachment. So until the Codex comes out, you only have one choice anyway. So it's not really an option. But as you alluded to, that's always been one of the incredible strengths to Warmachine and Hordes in the past, is that by just changing out that one figure, you have basically a new army. A lot of the core tenets are similar, but you'll be going for basically a different style of gameplay. And it's great to hear that Mark IV has continued with that strength, and of course that with these kind of different core products, they've made that onboarding and kind of growth of your army that much easier, because you don't
And
have
I
to just
think
buy little individual blisters.
we're going to see. I think from what I've got a hint of is that I think we'll see more 2-player starter sets, because the plastic command cadre, I think we'll see one of those for every army.
Hmm.
It just feels right, and they're going to want to do one for the Hordes factions. I say the Hordes factions, but what would be war warlocks and war beasts. It makes
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. As I'm sure you're aware, Infinity does, like, I think every year there's a new 2-player starter
Yeah,
set
there is.
for people to pick up, and if they do kind of a similar approach, I think that'd be pretty rad. They could do that for at least like 4 years probably without any doubling up.
And the thing you said about, I mean, I think Warmachine this year is going to be pretty exciting, because I think we're going to start seeing stuff. We will be seeing stuff. We know for certain we're going to start seeing stuff that's going to make the game feel different to previous editions. And I didn't realize we already see some of this in the Orgoth army. So in the Orgoth army already, and this is why I kind of want to get an Orgoth army
Hmm.
already. It's like, God damn it. So the command cadre for the Orgoth, right, is pretty sweet. And if you get it and you get the battle group box, you're off to a really fun start, because, and yeah, that'll get you like what? That'll be about 50 point. Be about a 50 point army then. So, and that's the thing. The game scales perfectly fine to all levels. Like, I've played 30-point games for demos. I've played with the command cadres. I've played 50-point games. I'm mostly going to play a 75-point game on Wednesday. It's the same
Cool.
game at every scale. You just got a few more, toys in your toolbox to use on the
Hmm.
battlefield.
Hmm.
So, but this is where things get really interesting. I didn't realize with the Orgoth one. So I thought the Orgoth all had their own versions of Warjacks, and then I noted something. I was like, they've got a giant war beast. How does that work? And then I checked the command cadre. That also has a war beast that's got weapons, prosthetic weapons attached to it. And that's when I looked into the army listing for it. And I'm going to actually open up the Warmachine app on the desktop, which obviously is a great thing as well, because you can print out the PDFs of your armies from the
perfect.
desktop app. So I've been doing that ready for demo games. So I've printed out the PDF sheets, and I've used sticky back plastic so that they're then dry wipeable for demos. So I don't need to have the a tablet and a phone with me at events for that.
Nice.
So the cool thing about Orgoth is, come on, load up, god damn it, is they don't just have warjacks in the army. They have, if I go to build a force and I choose Orgoth, where are we? There we go. They've got, that's a warcaster, that's a warcaster, that's a warcaster. So far, all of their characters, all their leaders are warcasters, okay? Of which one of them is Ursus the Betrayed. So remember Ursus, who was the first warcaster in metal for Khador back in original release. So was he the original? Or have I got that wrong? Was he in the box? No, maybe
Sorsha was usually.
Sorsha was in the box. He was the other warcaster you could buy. Well, he's now part of Orgoth because he's actually in the plotline, has a bloodline that's related to Orgoth. So anyway, but anyway, so there's warjacks. There's there's 3 warjacks, one of which is a character warjack. And then what else do they have? I thought, have they got war beasts? It's not war beasts. They've got monstrosities. So monstrosities are what Cephalix had in previous editions. So Cephalix are an army which you can still use, and they, in the setting, are like psionic, so they're not technically using magic to control their armies, to control their whatever the equivalent of warjacks. So monstrosities, in rules terms, act the same way as warjacks. They've got system boxes, but they're living, so you can heal them as a living model.
Oh, okay.
And then the other fun thing about monstrosities is, if I look at the library and I go into it, so this is why, you can see why I'm interested in this army now, because it's got like a very different flavor that you can mix and match monstrosities with warjacks. If I go into the rule book and I go down to monstrosities, where are we? Cephalix. No. Where is it? Where's Cephalix with warcasters and healing? Where is monstrosities? I know it's in here somewhere. There's war beasts. There's monstrosities. Okay, so monstrosities, they have got some extra rules. So obviously, they're living. They've got damage boxes. They have a brain rather than a cortex, but they still act the same way as focus. But they're also rage fueled, which means they can be allocated focus normally. They do not power up and do not automatically gain focus, though, like a warjack at the start of the control phase. Okay. Instead, they gain a focus point each time they suffer damage as a result of an attack or continuous effect. So they've got a slightly different way of getting focus, and that means, because they're going to get focus from being damaged, it promotes aggressive play with them.
Yeah. So, but when you say continuous effect, does that also mean like positive buffing, or does that have to be some sort of a negative effect?
No, continuous effect would be something like fire, or corrosion, or similar to that.
Yeah,
if there's another one. I can't think of another one. So yeah, and because the point I'm making is, though, Orgoth already has in their army list 2 different types of war noun. Basically, they've got monstrosities and warjacks, and we already know that with the old Umbre army that's going to be coming out for Khador, and also some of the things coming up for Orgoth, we're going to see warlocks and war beasts added to Khador and Orgoth. So we've now got this new, rather than just having the ability of mixing a match within a faction, your warcaster with your army options, you're now going to have a mix and match where you go, right, am I playing Khador with warjacks, or am I playing Khador with war beasts?
Yeah, that's a big change. And I'm assuming that in larger games, you could
Yeah.
potentially have both a warlock and a warcaster.
Yeah, so if you
Yeah,
play, I think it's Duo Grand Melee, you can select two Warcasters or a mixture of Warcaster and Warlock,
hmm. Hmm. That's pretty neat.
depending upon the army's options available. It's pretty
That's pretty
cool.
neat. Yeah,
We've not seen this before. I mean, the only way we kind of ever had warlocks turning up in a warcaster army and vice versa was via having mercenaries that were
sure.
themselves warlocks or warcasters, and we have that already in the case of, like, for example, you can take in an Orgoth army as a mercenary, Carver, Lord Carver Ultimus, the Pharaoh character warlock, and he comes with a character war beast, which is brutal. It's absolutely insane looking.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's where we're up to with Warmachine. I feel like the road ahead is there's a lot of work to kind of, like, I feel, because I had this at the club when I was running a demo. Someone came past and was like, "Oh, you're playing Warmachine?" I was like, "Yeah," and he goes, "Oh, from Steamforge." And I was like, but he admitted, like, he also plays God Tier. So, um, as much as I think there's been some missteps out there with respect to, like, Guild Ball and stuff, and
Sure.
how the community feels about that. On the flip side, I feel like it can be built back up with trust. The fact that the game is good, the models are improving. We've got plastic models coming out, and the app is very good. The app is having its yearly massive update rather than just the incremental ones they do. So there's good quality of life updates coming. It just feels well maintained, if that's a way of,
Hmm. Hmm.
if that makes sense. And
Yeah,
they're
no,
not a huge
certainly.
rock. It's not, and again, you're not having to go through and go, oh, they've done all the updates, and then go, right, how do I get these updates into my rule book if I'm not using the app, or if I want to use the app? Some of the new stuff that they revealed recently for, what was it, Grotmus, that Games Workshop did, those things
Yes, that's
now
right.
you could see they're now behind the paywall.
What,
So
seriously? Those
yeah,
just came out like 2 weeks
oh
ago.
no, they've all been paywalled.
Oh my goodness. Jeez. Uh, well,
And do you know
I
what's
guess
funny?
I won't.
I walked
Mhm.
into one of my friendly local game stores today to pick up some stuff. Um, I ordered the new squat cards for Necromunda because I was like,
Oh,
I'll
cool.
order
Yeah,
those
yeah.
because those always go out of stock.
Yeah,
Even if it's like 2 or 3 months before I even get the squat book and squats to build for Necromunda, I've got the cards. That's the important thing.
sure.
But I saw on the shelves packs of index cards for 40k 10th. They're just sat there, and you're just like thinking, well, of course they're going to sit there. Who's going to buy those? They're all out of date,
Oh
pretty
yeah, yeah,
much.
yeah. If you look on eBay, there's still plenty of sealed 8th edition data
Yeah,
cards and index cards just floating around.
like,
I
and that's
guess
the thing.
because there's such a markup on them, I guess they make enough money that they can overprint, and if they don't sell, well, it's just a problem for the FLGS.
Yeah, and that's really bad because that shifts you know the cost onto the gaming store for something which is. And I feel this is where it feel. I think actually it does feel like that GW kind of there's. I think with rule books and the printed material does start taking the piss a bit because there's editions rule books out there that get invalidated to the point where people are like, well, why bother buying it? Like, it's just, I've got to put all the errata in. You know,
Yep.
it's really weird. Whereas Necromunda, is the other game I've been playing, and that's just really good. Campaign system. We're playing Lauren Misrule, so it's like grabbing rackets. There's a lot of creds flowing in the game. People are already like buying like ambots and shit like that, and that's just that feels like, again, the one thing which is the issue with the game is I think with the core book is where, and I have to agree with what they said on one of the recent Jugs episodes because Rob was talking about this, is that the core book could still do with better organization. Like, Necromunda at its core is not a difficult system. There's just a lot of options, and the organization of the rule book sometimes in places logically doesn't make sense. But once you've played the game a few times, you're into campaign, you get some muscle memory on where you're looking things up in the book. So
Gotcha.
yeah. Anyway, so I mean that's kind of what we've been playing, right? And the other thing actually, and this was interesting because again, talking to Mark, who I'm doing some design work with, and who lives in Nottingham but in Sheffieldish, and I'll be playing some Warmachine with and so forth. He was saying how about movement. You know how I was saying Warmachine has movement shenanigans, and you feel like that you can make that critical choice of like, I've moved that model out of the way, I can now snipe the Warcaster or something to the effect. Where you've done something of critical importance. Warhammer: The Old World has some of that too, because of the way they changed how units fall back when they lose a combat. They don't just run off the begin running. If you lose a combat, you go, well, that's fine because I can just step back.
Yes.
And you can basically draw the enemy further into your ranks to be swamped. So actually there's important decision making in there about if you repel the enemy, do you follow up? And it makes then all the decisions about where you move, and if you do have things that can fly or are fast moving or teleport or other anything that can change positioning, it makes that really important in that game. And I think that's really interesting that they've really gone, what is Warhammer Fantasy Battle about? And they've made decisions in that design to make how you move things important.
Yeah. I'm going to hold off on commenting on that because I'm going to be playing a whole bunch of the Old World in the next couple months. So I'll have a much better feel. I will say that the one time I did play, I was playing Vampire Counts with tons of skeletons and zombies. So my battle line did not shift.
But, it doesn't shift.
That's always one of the weird things about Warhammer Fantasy is that there's a rule book, and then you have these very complex armies that ignore large portions of the rule book or change things. So
that's a really interesting thing, isn't it? Like I think, does Games Workshop have an issue of doing that where they go, here's the rules, and then there's quite a few armies, and then it seems to become the trend that they ignore a swathe of rules in the core. I
feel like certainly Warhammer Fantasy does that. Warhammer 40,000, I feel like all the core rules apply to pretty much everyone, especially now that vehicles have the same stat line as everything else. You don't have the situation where Tyranids, for example, don't have any vehicles, for example, or Necrons only have that one giant pyramid thing. So it's certainly an issue they've had in the past and has now carried over into the old world. I don't know if I want to call it an issue. Questionable feature. How would we call it that? Inefficient feature. So yeah, it's an interesting one. So Chris, I think the way you were kind of taking our conversation though was kind of looking forward to 2025. What kind of big things are you thinking about for the wargaming side of things?
And that's where we can actually introduce the episode. This is Realm of Fire, and we've been talking shit about what we've been playing, and this whole episode is really about what we're looking forward to this year in wargaming and minis. So I'm on regular host Chris, and I'm obviously joined by Mike. What am I looking forward to this year in wargaming? What am I going to get up to? Playing more Warmachine is definitely one thing. I'm running demos for 3 events over the next 2 months. So I've got a demo event I'm doing at the end of January for Warmachine, and then I'm doing another 2 at the end of March. So I'm doing ChillCon and another smaller event on my doorstep. So those are all events in Sheffield. So I'm really looking forward to showing people that Warmachine is fun and has flavor, both as a setting, because writing for Iron Kingdoms is really cool,
Oh yeah.
and as a war game, it's great. So that's definitely one thing I'm I think we've said a lot about what's coming up for that, and that's what I'm excited for. Then on the horizon, obviously playing and completing the Necromunda campaign that I've got going, and then be in a position to set up the next one a few months later to
Yeah. Yeah.
try something out. I think go for a full Ash Waste campaign and not
Okay.
using
Are you
forces.
gonna? Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. You're not gonna play Enforcers this time. You're gonna
No,
switch to something else.
I think I'll
Cool.
switch to my Van Sar finally.
Oh, sick. Sick.
so
Yeah.
so I can use hoverboards and a Achilles Ridge Runner. That'll be my kind of vehicle approach for them. And I think that. I feel like on the horizon though is going to be the Enforcers kind of house book, because they've done it for squats, and I feel we're at the right point where the miniatures range for squats is akin to what there is for Enforcers, and I think the only thing missing for the Enforcers range is a extra weapon sprue, like you get for all the other gangs, to give all the other options. So if that comes out, and they've already got a vehicle, they've got the Tauros. They could always add another vehicle, and I think it'd be cool if they bring out an actual model for like Enforcers on some sort of like motorbike, because come on. Then that would be pretty wicked for that range. So I'm kind of, that's where I'm hoping things go with that. I still need to play some Legions Imperialis. I've not had time this year, but I really do want to play it.
Yeah. Do you have the starter box?
I've got a full 2,000 points of
Oh,
2,000. I've got like at least 1,500 of Blood Angels painted, and can push it to 2,000 quite happily with my Adeptus Titanicus. So I can field Titans with Marines, and I've got a Thunderbolt gunship and aircraft.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, that'd be really great to hear about, because I remember it coming out, but I haven't really heard of people playing it too much for whatever reason.
Yeah, I don't know. A friend of mine's got stuff, and Mark, who I mentioned, I gave him for his birthday present the other half of the Legions Imperialis box. So I just gave him like the Imperial Guard, and I think he's mostly gonna, if he's gonna do anything, I have a sneaking suspicion he might supplement it with like, or he'll look at like the Adeptus Mechanicus stuff that's out, because you can now field a full Adeptus Mechanicus army, and there's stuff that means you could do Dark Mechanicus, so they've got their own like walkers. But that's all stuff that came out last year, so I don't know what to really expect from Legions Imperialis this year, other than maybe a few, like, I think we're missing like the super heavy tanks that we used to have in Epic. And maybe getting into things like, maybe we might see like the demon engines from Epic. The Cornate Lord of Battles, things like that.
Maybe we'll get a couple of Primarchs in Epic scale, just like the good old days.
No, I don't think. No, because I mean, Legions Imperialis is very much like set before everything starts going really weird, chaosy, and everyone becomes demon princes.
Bummer. That'd be great though. A plastic set that gave you every Primarch.
Yeah, weird
in plastic. Yeah.
So that's where. So there's that, and then the other thing really on my horizon, other than we officially kickstart doing any development on the Eldritch Automata war game, that's still, there's still a lot of going on with the actual RPG to get that out before committing time and effort. Is the Gundam war game, which
Gundam Assemble,
it's gonna be summertime, so I think it's going to be June, and the core box will have like three miniatures in it. So from what I understand, and from what they've shown in the video, and obviously I'm sure things will change before then, they're about 2 inches tall or so.
Okay.
The Gundams.
They're
so
big.
Not very big. they're on hex bases, and the game zone looks to be about a 2 foot square covered in hexes using d10s. Um, so I
Ooh.
think we are looking at essentially thinking of other games out there which are kind of a similar amount of real estate on the table and models. It reminds me of the Devil May Cry game they did that Steamforge Games did. So essentially, what I'm
Okay.
saying is it's kind of like Gundam does arena battles.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean,
In
that's
and that
quite
all,
fitting for
yeah,
the show, right?
and
Because there's going to be.
it's fitting for Build Divers. I think is it Build Divers is one of the shows where Gundam is it like people build Gundams and modify Gundams from all of the Gundam series and they play them in a virtual online game. That's basically what the cartoon is.
Oh, okay. That's pretty cool. I'm more familiar with G Gundam, which
Yeah,
is definitely arena battles as well.
yeah, G
Uh,
Gundam is
G Gundam would have awesome. Actually, wow, that would be a great one to mine for Gundam Assemble. But I think that's going to be probably a later release. Yeah, this is actually kind of interesting. So you're saying they're 2-inch miniatures. I don't know if this is like a good thing or a missed opportunity, but it's definitely far out of scale with BattleTech, which is another hex-based
yeah,
miniatures game, which has tons of terrain coming out for it. That'd be really cool if they could use it. And as well, I think it's gonna be out of scale with the HeroScape hexes, which has been unfortunate. A lot of people use those for BattleTech as kind of 3D terrain, but
yeah,
they're probably going to release their own things. Again, Gundam is probably more fitting for arena combat, just the way that the anime is set up and how they're usually flying when they are battling and doing a lot of fast maneuvers and turns, as opposed to the slow plotting terrestrial combat of say BattleTech.
yeah. Because essentially in a Gundam series, you've got really kind of two arenas of two kind of primary kind of ways of fighting where battles take place. Either the Gundams are in a more terrestrial environment where clearly being able to fly is a benefit in some respects for those Gundams that can. The ones that can't are generally going to field some really ridiculous heavy weaponry. Um, and then when you're not like on a planet's surface or inside a within the interior of a colony, then the other arena of battle for Gundam is in space, which then, how do you model that for a war game? Which again brings us back to why the hex grid arena, as it were, makes the most sense for how to run the game, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Um, we'll see how it turns out. I mean, a lot of excitement about it. I'm highly interested. I think that I would love to see a game where you can have a bunch of Zaku's going up against 1 or 2 Gundams and just kind of seeing how it plays out, as well as the more arena combat between just 1 or 2 Gundams in like a G Gundam kind of style. I think it's gonna be pretty exciting. And if you told me a year ago, hey Mike, there's gonna be a Gundam miniatures game, you're going to be interested in it, I would have not believed you, but here we are.
Yeah, I know, right? I know, and this year's been kind of crazy because everyone who is like, let's just say a Warhammer influencer, because there's definitely Warhammer influencers. I don't think there's
Sure.
Warmachine influencers in the same notoriety or anything. But the fact that Bandai has been able to grab the attention of those influencers and through them make Gundam war game adjacent and then go, we're bringing out a war game is like,
Yeah,
great PR.
it is.
Right?
It is.
Because
Yeah.
Gundams are fun. Like, I mean, I haven't quite got myself to the point that I want to buy a Gundam to and then like paint it, because I think you have to do a lot of forward planning with Gundam, because you want to clip it together to get the body right, but then you need to take all the armor off and so forth if you want to be able to like spray paint
Yeah.
the outer
You
carapace, as it were.
you might paint it. Well, I think you've seen like the Gunpla hobbying tutorials where they have like those little pens that they use to do the
Yeah,
shadowing, that kind of stuff. So they have their own methodology that's different than the way you paint a Warhammer miniature. But if I were to do the painting, I would
Mhm.
probably spray paint it still on the sprue, maybe clip off as
I've
much
been
as possible.
I've been thinking this too. I
Yeah.
think if I do it, I'm gonna airbrush any of I'll, I'll mostly be doing airbrushing on the sprue.
Okay.
I'll treat it like Adeptus Titanicus.
Sure. Sure. Perfect. Yeah.
And that leads me to something I've discovered through Gunpla, which is Gunpla adjacent, because it's also produced by Bandai, is 30-minute missions. So these are Gunpla models, but they're not Gundams. They're in their own setting, so they are still mecha, but there's a different. I don't think there's any anime or anything related to it, but they're called 30-minute missions because they're meant to be very easy to build. So they're meant to literally take 30 minutes to build. But the cool thing about the kits is you can mix and match between the kits very easily. So you can build really like, Frankenstein combinations of these mecha. And also, I think they've got like very generic, like a plug system where different, you can bolt on like extra arms, or you can bolt the torso onto a four-leg torso, bottom half, or and so forth. Or even like in the case of some, they might have a robot mode, but then also you can reconfigure it into like an aircraft mode or whatever. But also there's weapon kits that you can buy as separate boxes. So I've bought a bundle of 5 of these mecha and a weapons kit because I have plans. Obviously, I'm thinking about the development of Eldritch Automata, and so I was like
Yeah.
thinking, well, I need some stuff to proxy with and test things out, and they just seem like they're going to be about the right kind of scale. Like, if you think about the entry grade scale of Gundam, they're what, roughly about 4 inches tall, I think, maybe 4 or 5 inches tall,
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
which is what a what size Titan? Not a Warhound, not a Warlord. What's the one in between? Oh my god, Reaver.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's Reaver Titan scale, which is cool.
Yeah, so that was actually something I didn't bring up when we were talking about scale, but it sounds like the 2-inch scale might be good for matching up with Adeptus Titanicus buildings and the like. So if you want to, kind of spruce up
Yeah,
your arena a little bit, I think that'd be pretty cool. But we'll
because
have to see what the
because
rules are and what the angle is on that.
because a Gundam is generally a Gundam, or a mobile suit, sorry, is 15-20 meters tall. So
Okay.
that, as a 2.5-inch miniature next to a legion, next to Legions Imperialis, Adeptus Titanicus building, it's about right. It is about right. It's about a
Mm,
3-story building in that scale.
yeah. Yeah,
Which
that'll
is
be pretty
also,
cool.
is that not kind of comparable to Mech Warriors as well?
No, BattleTech miniatures they're 1 inch high. Scale's a
Ah,
little weird though because each hex on the board is 30 meters, so the
right.
miniatures are actually out of scale with the board that you're playing on.
Yeah, interesting.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's my gaming for the year, I think. I can't see anything else looming on the horizon that's going to come out, other than I'm finally going to try and get through some more what am I going to call it, Kingdom Death, because I haven't played any in ages and I want to get back into that now
Oh
that
yeah.
I'm wrapping up the decorating of my house. You don't want an expensive box out where you've got paint dripping everywhere. um
Sure. Yeah.
and I still have yet to play Batman Miniatures Game 3rd Edition, so I might try and make some time to do that and try it out. But that's pretty much my gaming plans for the year ahead and what I'm excited about releases. How about yourself?
Yeah, I don't see myself buying any new games right now. The only one that I've been tracking that I'm kind of interested in is this game called Kill Wager that
Right.
friend of the show Brendan has spoken about a couple times. That's a really interesting one, but I think I might just want to get the rules and then play with miniatures that I already have because I've got a lot of Imperial Navy troops, so I can just kind of use those just to represent the miniatures. But that's a neat one because you are playing the game And it's kind of a miniatures game, skirmish game where you're blasting other people on Mars or the moon, and based on what happens in the game, your forces could commit war crimes, right? You might decide like, hey, I need to stop that vehicle. I'm going to shoot at it despite there being a hostage in there. And if things go poorly, you've done something bad, and there can be political repercussions in future missions. So I think
Oh
that's a
wow.
really neat way to add some morality
Yeah.
and importance to your decision making into the game. That's really lacking in most other war games. So I definitely want to explore that, but I've heard the rulebook is very convoluted, so that's why I haven't really taken that plunge yet. Um, and then I've got a lot of other miniatures and games that I want to explore before I purchase other things. One thing I've got, which is really got me thinking, unfortunately, is that I've got a ton of historical miniatures for the American War of Independence, Revolutionary War, and I bought them 4 years ago. I've painted some of them, but they've just been sitting in a box for at least the
Yeah.
last 3 years, and I haven't played the game with them. It would be Black Powder from Warlord
Yeah.
Games that I'd be playing, and haven't been touching the miniatures, and they take up a lot of space because I've got a lot of them. As you'd assume for a historical war game. So I really need to make a decision as to whether or not I'm going to keep those or
What
sell
what
them.
scale are they?
They're 28 millimeter. They are on like 40 by 40 bases. And the reason why I got it was that I was sitting there. It was the height of the pandemic, and I was missing
Yeah.
Warhammer Fantasy. And I was like, you know what? I need to get into one of these historical games that still has rank and flank, square bases, that sort of thing. But now I've got Warhammer Fantasy again, and that's taking
Well,
up a lot of my mental
what
bandwidth.
you could do is, could you not repurpose some of those miniatures then? Like you could look at
Oh, absolutely.
Silver Bayonet.
I have a copy of Silver Bayonet. Yeah. Yeah. I could
Mm,
definitely just use them
I
and just be like, oh, we'll just change the time period a little bit.
yeah, I think that'd be a good shout. That
Yeah,
reminds me,
absolutely.
like that's like because obviously the two other game I've actually got two other games I need to try out as well. I've got miniatures for one, and I've got more miniatures coming for it, and I need to paint. Is Trench Crusade because obviously that's in height of fashion
Sure.
right now.
Sure.
And good rule system. I advise having a look at it. It's quite simple. Not lots of dice rolling. It's literally 2d10 plus or minus extra d10s in there. And then the other one is where is it? Is if I move the paint stripper, which is there for my Scorn army that I'm going to repaint.
Ooh.
Because I got my Scorn army back, which is mad.
Yeah.
Like, don't ask how that happened. How I discovered my Scorn army being sold on eBay, and I bought it back for less than I sold it for.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
Yeah. The other one is Planet 28, which is a miniatures agnostic 28mm war game.
Okay.
So this one, Sean said I should look at because it's quite apparently nice and simple and fun. It's kind of like a Necromunda like system. In the sense it's kind of like you're playing war bands. I think what I'm trying to do though for it is I'm trying to look for a like thematically some miniatures that are not like gothic grimdark. I want to look for what I've got in my head as like baroque grimdark. I feel they're two
Okay.
different things in my head. Gothic is very defined by Games Workshop. I think baroque has a more artisan kind of feel to the sci-fi elements in it, like a lot more. I don't know. I just haven't
I
seen
would,
what I want yet.
yeah. Yeah. If I were to envision that, it would be kind of like Gilded Age. Oh, geez, what's that guy? That like 1950s kind of sci-fi, but make it kind of Gilded Age with these very like artisanally crafted items and the like. Is that kind of what you're
Um,
thinking?
so you're thinking
Flash Gordon,
Flash
but
Gordon,
Gilded
yeah.
Age.
I think Flash
Yeah.
Gordon mixed with Lynch Dune is about right.
Ooh, yeah, yeah, that'd be spicy.
So I think if you think of how the Harkonnen look in that and the Atreides, there is a grim darkness to that, but it's not like covered in skulls and
Sure.
gothic, if that makes sense. It's very again. I think that's the thing. That's the difference. I think that is the difference between baroque sci-fi and and gothic sci-fi is. It's about, are there too many fucking skulls? If the answer is yes, it's a Games Workshop knockoff. If there isn't, then it's mostly something that can work as Baroque sci-fi.
Sure.
Anyway, what other things are we going to play? So okay, so you've got your Warhammer Fantasy battles coming up. You've already talked about that. That's cool. I keep thinking, do I want a Chaos Army for it? But I can't start collecting another army.
You've got a lot going on.
All the Empire releases though recently are re-releases. I think is the most exciting thing going right now, because for 50 quid, I say 50 quid, I don't know what it is in US, you get let me look up the Warhammer site for this. Warhammer.
Are you talking about the battalion for the Empire?
I am thinking of not the battalion, though the battalion is a pretty good deal actually. 110 quid gets you,
and then
gets you 4 units.
Like 60 or 72 state troopers in a steam tank. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Wow. Yeah, you get Jesus Christ, that's pretty cool.
Right?
Wow.
The only problem is that state troopers are kind of garbage. Infantry in the old world are not great, unfortunately.
Yeah, but my point was actually for £52.50 English pounds, you can get the Free Company Militia.
Oh yeah,
and that is how many models? That is 32 militia models, which, as we know, are basically Mordheim.
They are the Mordheim. Yep, you're just missing the adventurer sprue out of it. Which had the little treasure chest and the rope.
Yeah,
and the stuff.
Nah.
The lantern. I'm classic for conversion, but
yeah, I'm kind of eyeing it up to get one of those, because he could quite easily make 3 war bands with some bits left out with some men left over. And one of the things I'm doing for Warmachine, obviously, is I'm kind of sourcing some extra terrain. I've seen some really good 3D printed ruined, buildings for that kind of time period that would work for Warmachine and this, and yeah, that'd be pretty fun. I think that'd be pretty cool. Mordheim, so that's the best release I've seen, is the fact that Mordheim is more than viable, and also Plastic Flagellants are back as a kit and so forth. So I think between all of that, you could have a lot of fun for Mordheim right now.
Yeah, I did grab a couple of things from the Empire release just to have them. I guess I want to do some miniatures with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay or anything like that.
Oh, good. So, yeah. So you is there anything coming up for BattleTech?
I haven't touched BattleTech in several years, but it's been incredibly popular in the area. People are really having fun with both the basic game and Alpha Strike, which is the kind of larger scale fast play version. So that seems to be doing very, very well locally. And I know the people playing it. I just haven't really felt the need to play a game. I think if the people I knew who played it before said hey Mike, we're going to be playing some BattleTech over at Alpha Omega or something like that, I'd probably drive on down and play a game. But I don't really feel like playing with randos right now.
Yeah,
actually, my nephew just got a BattleTech starter set, so maybe I'll play with him sometime this year. That'd be pretty cool. But
the other, I was going to say, the other local game which I've got the new rulebook for and the tokens for, but again, not in time to play, is the recent iteration of Kill Team. I think that's going to be the only way I enjoy 40k away from Necromunda is Kill Team.
Yeah,
because it seems to play well. Now I've got rid of shapes. But you're going to say, well, what's the other game that you're interested in or you've been seeing some popularity of?
Well, maybe you can hear the sirens going by, because I'm about to bring up something that isn't Games Workshop, and that is Fallout Wasteland Warfare. I've got some miniatures. I need to build them and kind of experience that. It's a game that seems to be a real catch-all, wherein it's got 2-player mode, it's got campaign mode, it's got 1-player solo or co-op where you would go up against AI decks for the opposing miniatures. It's got a lot going on, a lot of different features. So I think it'd be cool to kind of dig into that and see what's going on. I'm also aware that they came out with a kind of a Necromunda inspired game, Fallout Factions, where you can play as different
Yeah.
raider gangs vying for territory and the like. Actually, the guy James Hewlett, who did the I think it was Hewlett, who did I think Necromunda at
Yeah, he did
Forge
Necromunda
World.
2017
Mhm,
release. Yeah,
mhm.
he did Underhive.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, he worked on this one, so I think it's going to have some good stuff in it.
it's
So
interesting you say about the solo play for Fallout, because the other, because I backed and I've got we still yet to play the RPG of, is the Cahors Cthulhu, which is the oh, what is it? It's the
Modifius Roman Empire.
Modifius 2D20
Yep.
Eldritch Horror, Roman Age Eldritch Horror. And they brought out, there are STLs for miniatures. You can, I think you maybe buy miniatures directly from them. Actually, I'm certain you can. And again, that has a war game, and I think also that supports solo play. So I really see Modifius is go down this route of like supporting solo play miniatures games, which is
Yeah, yeah, they've
interesting.
got solo RPGs as well. It's a kind of an angle they've been taking recently, which is pretty cool. I like it.
Neat. I'm trying to think of other fun wargaming stuff. So actually, I think, is there any other releases or things you're looking forward to this year? I mean, obviously there's going to be conventions and stuff, which we'll talk about when things get penciled in properly. Like obviously, I'm going to go to UK Games Expo. That's a given.
Yeah,
And
certainly, certainly.
I've got ChillCon coming up.
Yeah, I got too many miniatures, so I need to not buy any this year.
Same,
How about
same.
that for a challenge? Just gotta paint
Yeah,
more.
I need to, like I said, I need to get through some backlog and not buy as much stuff. I think just buy Necromunda and Warmachine is pretty much where I am. So I'm gonna, let's, to finish up, right? Let's switch tack to a topic that turned up, which I actually found quite interesting. I watched the video for. So Louise Sugden put out a video a couple of days ago about on Rogue Hobbies about how the painting style for Golden Demon and the standards obviously have increased since the first Golden Demon, but there's clearly different different periods of, like, there's different phases of painting styles and techniques, and where you can see there are some jumps in skill. And have you did you get around to watching that video?
I did, yeah. I checked it out, and I think she had some interesting analysis. But as we were discussing, I think there's more influence to this than
Yeah.
just Games Workshop, which is really what she was focusing on.
So I've got a first few points which I think just builds on what we see with what Games Workshop does initially, and I think sometimes when you see those jumps in painting style and methods, I think they relate to things that Games Workshop is doing at that time. So I think when you see kind of a jump when it goes from that more 80s style to the 90s kind of bright colors but very clean looking, that clearly is because Games Workshop is finally kind of starting that march of plastic miniatures, and so things have cleaner lines, and cleaner lines allow for edge highlighting more easily.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes it's not just about the paint and painting style. I think it also has to be about where the evolution of the miniatures have gone. So details are becoming less soft. Sculpting, the sculptors who's even if they're sculpting Space Marines, right? They have some standard parts now in plastic which they use to make their metal miniatures, to sculpt the metal, to do that's used to create the metal miniature. So I think the level of, when you see these transitions in the material, that's when you start seeing some changes. We also, it has to be acknowledged, you see a transition in the paints that are available. So early Games Workshop, I guess you're using whatever acrylics were available and so forth, and then obviously, they get their own Citadel paint range that gets developed by the likes of Mike McVeigh, and then that goes through however many iterations we see of that, and various other things come out. Like I feel like the transition we see around after third edition 40k comes out, yeah, I also think that's when spray undercoating becomes more prevalent because Games Workshop starts selling spray paints.
Uh, maybe. Uh, you're talking third edition. That's 1998. I mean, we were using my brothers when we were painting BattleTech miniatures. We're using spray primers all the time.
Right.
So that was definitely commonly available.
But I think they became
But
available like with the GW branding, and so it
sure,
enters
maybe.
the kind of zeitgeist of painting.
Definitely in the late 90s, early 2000s, Games Workshop really encouraged people to start from black and then build up from
Yeah,
there, which would definitely result in some kind of darker schemes. And, one thing we didn't really hear mentioned too much, which I think is pretty crucial, is that a lot of those bright colors and the kind of blending effects that they were doing was so that they would stand out more on camera,
yeah,
because they needed to have really bright contrasting colors, um, which to today's standards almost seem a little garish. But otherwise, if they made it very dark, they wouldn't stand out. So a really good uh, kind of contrast to that was that in like Warhammer Fantasy Fourth Edition in the rulebook, when you looked through and you found the Skaven army, it was all with very dark brown muted colors, and it didn't really show up that well
yeah.
in the photographs compared to other miniatures. But it also kind of worked because it was a bunch of insidious rat men who were probably
I
pretty
don't.
filthy.
I hadn't thought about the influence of the need to publish, the books, the rule books,
Mm-hmm.
the army books also influences the standards that Games Workshop set for the miniatures, because again they're like,
Yes.
well, our printing resolution is only this good, so we need to have good contrast, and that can only be really achieved with brighter colors against darker backgrounds.
Yes,
Um,
yes. And I would suspect that there was probably a time in Golden Demon where there was a really awesome miniature that was really incredible, but they knew they wouldn't be able to photograph it and show it
yeah,
in White Dwarf and other publications. So it might have actually just gotten an honorable mention because of that.
interesting. Yeah, that's quite curious. That, but the thing
Hmm.
which we, in our discussion we had via chat before this is, I think, looking at these transitions, relating them to, say, from just with looking with from inside of Games Workshop, where you go, it's the change of availability of paints, or it's the change of the quality of the miniatures, or as you say, it's like the what public printing, publishing images becomes better, easier, higher quality. So you can have darker looking models because you can still you know you can still see what's going on. And then
Yeah.
also the changes in style of the game. So like with 40k's changed to third edition onwards, things become a bit more grittier again, rather than kind of the more cartoonish sci-fi we were more used to with the previous editions. So there's that. And then, so I think someone asked about like what on the Rogue Hobbies Discord about this, and they said, "Oh, what was the painting magazine that Rackham did?" Oh, I say painting magazine, but just magazine they did, and it was like, was it called like Havoc or something? And it was like, it's Cry Havoc. So I dug out the first issue of that series, and there's only like about 12, 13 magazines, because Rackham shot themselves in the foot. We won't get into that,
Oh
but
yeah.
I was stunned by the level of that publication. Again, like if you compare it to what White Dwarf is now, Cry Havoc you could put on the shelf now and it still look fantastic. And when you compare publications of around about the same time, so I'm looking at that kind of 2003 2004 period. That's when I think Rackham was on the way up and becoming more notable outside of France. You also had Warmachine arrive on the market, okay, and that was the start of Warmachine making waves and having Games Workshop's lunch to a certain extent for a few years. And so there's things there which there that become, either it's a product that's a fun game, or they're miniatures that don't look like Games Workshop miniatures. And that opens people's eyes up to what else is out on the market, not just in terms of the miniatures, but also They see different ways of painting models, and they also see they become aware of different products out there outside of the Games Workshop ecosystem. And I feel those are contributing factors to when we see the changes in painting style at Golden Demon.
Yeah, quite possibly. I remember this is probably like 2007 or 2008. There used to be a podcast called Podhammer. It was a Warhammer Fantasy
Mm.
podcast, and I recall somebody or a couple of people talking about how there was some like revolution in like European miniatures painting going on at that time, and how there was a lot of incredible things coming out. Um, and that was spoken about in the context of what was going on with Rackham miniatures, because a lot of the people were ogling like the Wolfen for confrontation and wanting to make an entire army of those guys for use in Warhammer Fantasy, because let's face it, their pewter sculpts a lot of the times were better than Games Workshop at that time, and yeah, I think there was a lot of really great painting going on. But nowadays, I'm pretty sure that a lot of these like YouTube painters and the like are, in their personal time, they're probably painting all miniatures from all sorts of different companies and ones that they really
Yeah.
like. They aren't just doing Warhammer, and when they do, they often are just painting Warhammer miniatures for YouTube, basically, because it probably gets them more clicks, that sort of thing. Painting how to paint a Space Marine is going to get you X amount of
A
dollars,
lot more
basically.
clicks. Yeah.
Yeah, then hey, look at this Wolfen miniature from 2005 from a company that doesn't exist anymore,
Yeah.
even though it's really great miniature. So yeah, I think that definitely has a lot of influence. In preparation for this, I was taking a look at some old BattleTech miniatures that were painted for their old camo specs kind of publications, and uh, there's definitely some different techniques, but I don't think there was enough that would really be causing much of an influence to Games Workshop. They didn't have the contrasting colors that much. They had a lot more like muted camouflages and that sort of thing. Only rarely would there be like parade colors painted on the battle mechs, but there were some kind of cool things that I saw with getting kind of like natural gemming effects on
Mm.
like the cockpit
Yeah.
glass or windshields and the like, which definitely seemed pretty cool.
Yeah, because I mean,
mm,
for me, in my kind of like painting, kind of like painting miniatures. So obviously, I was working for Games Workshop part time when Warmachine released. So when I went into the friendly local game store that had only just opened, so that was a few months before Warmachine was on the shelves there. So Fanboy 3, which has now been going for years, still running, different locations where it first opened, but still also a well-known shop within the country, let alone the world, because Dave seems to know everyone in the industry as well. But yeah, when I opened up Warmachine Prime, and you've got Mike McVeigh writing about how to paint these miniatures, right? Talking about Citadel paints, and also talking about Vallejo, or talking about inks from Winsor Newton and so forth. Or it just opened up. I think it just, like, when you've got that going on, and then also at the same time you have Rackham in their painting guides online or in their magazine talking about, okay, and we use these Vallejo paints or whichever paints you get hold of, and then also they come out with their own, and like Private Press also come out with their own paint ranges, P3 and Rackham color. I just feel like that time, with the prevalence of those popular miniatures ranges for what they were, either very well designed, and obviously the standard that Rackham set is the non-metallic metals, and then you've got, with Warmachine, you've got what is just a very popular war game, and initially saying, well, just use what you can get hold of as paints. There's all these ranges that you can use, not just Citadel, and then having their own paint range come out. I feel like just when you inject into the miniatures ecosystem other models, which then have their own kind of established standards of what they look like painted, and using different materials, different from different brands, I feel that's what leads to people discovering new techniques and styles, and then they come back to they're painting their Games Workshop stuff and go, what if I paint a Space Marine in non-metallic metal?
Yeah.
And that's why we see, I think, when Louis Sugden points out in a video, like I think it's in like 2007, 2008, that non-metallic metal starts filtering into Golden Demon, and you start seeing entries painted that way. I'm like, that's clearly Rackham. That's Rackham influence, 100%.
Yeah, it makes sense. That's about when I heard about non-metallic metals. So, yeah, I think it's consistent. And I mean, when you look back and you've got a much more broad viewpoint of the industry, yeah, you'll see how those influences kind of play back and forth. We were also talking about some of the gameplay design influences, and how Warmachine was affecting a lot of things, and 2008, 2010, that kind of time period. They made a lot of changes to Warhammer Fantasy to make big monsters a bigger part of it, and that caused some weird issues with the metagame, let's say, back in those days. So it's always kind of interesting. Games Workshop likes to say that they're the biggest people in the industry, and they kind of discourage their employees from talking about other games or looking at other games, that sort of thing. But in actuality, a lot of them are taking a look at what's going on elsewhere and being influenced by it.
Yeah, I mean, it's
which is a good thing.
When Rackham folded, I think Games Workshop kind of took in a number of the sculptors and designers from Rackham.
Good.
Maybe even some of the painters, I could imagine. And then also, even now today, the editor of White Dwarf used to edit Prime magazine for Private Press. No Quarter.
Yeah.
So this is the thing. It's like, I think when you step back and realize where certain designers, painters, or simply just like writers and editors of the games and publications come from, they're part of this grander ecosystem which Games Workshop doesn't want to acknowledge, but is clearly influenced by, as though they come in to work for said company, for Games Workshop. And those styles, maybe, there's a brand style for Games Workshop. That's understandable. There's an identity that's there. But I think those techniques do begin to enter. It's and it's going to be really interesting, because I know Rackham models are going to be on the way back, because the IP was bought up by, I can't remember who now. I
remember hearing that.
I can't remember which company it was. Was it? It was either, I think it was Monolith. I don't think it was Mythic. I think it was Monolith.
Yeah. Monolith sounds familiar. Yeah, it'll be cool to see.
It'll be good to see those back. I mean, I keep eyeing up Rackham models on eBay and thinking, I should buy some more and paint some new ones again. I've still got loads unpainted, actually. It's really bad. It's terrible. I've got a load of Rackham models. I should really play it again, just out of interest. But I think it was just interesting, the whole discussion of that timeline of how we see painting styles and techniques and ability at Golden Demon change. And I think you can't just look at it from the Games Workshop point of view. Like, there's a lot more going on. Like, especially now with, I think airbrushing is so to a degree is more accessible. I don't mean as in cost, but I think how to do it is more accessible. Like, again, because of the internet, there are so many guides on how to use an airbrush, how to maintain an airbrush, how to, all of the how-tos are there.
Yeah, sure.
So that I think clearly has an impact on Golden Demon as well.
Yeah, it's a good point. I remember back in the day hearing about how those European painters, they were thinning down their paints really, really, really thin, basically, and using that as like a very progressive blending. And if you have an airbrush, that's even easier to do. So I'm sure that has a big effect.
Well, it's like P3 paints were designed to do two-brush blending. So that's where you have one brush that applies the paint, and then you have another brush that's just wet to feather that paint. I say feather, but you you're drawing the paint down to progressively make it more and more translucent with the water from that fresh paint, to do shading, and the pigment was designed to do that. So I think it was meant to have kind of two parts to it: a heavier part and a more lighter translucent part. That, from my understanding of what I've read, so that's quite curious, and it's going to be interesting to see what the new P3 paints are like, because Steamforge ran a Kickstarter for the new P3 range, so I've got some of those paints arriving at some point.
Cool.
Be really interesting to see how they perform in an airbrush, let alone just by hand. Cool. Oh, we've chatted a lot there.
I'm running out of steam.
Okay, that's our brain empty of stuff. Any final thoughts? Anything else? Anything else we're excited for?
I'm excited to see what cockamamie game Games Workshop brings back next. I think it's going to be Man of War for Warhammer Fantasy. That's it. That's my guess. 2025 Man of War.
You think Specialist Games going to do Man of War? That's
yeah. You didn't see it coming. That's why it's going to happen.
I mean, I wouldn't put it past Specialist Games doing Battlefleet Gothic.
There's been a rumor that it's already been redesigned, so
it would fit with Horus Heresy.
Yeah,
you just release, the Horus Heresy era starships, which are basically the Chaos Fleet from old Battlefleet Gothic.
Sure, yeah.
So there you go. You just do that. You just do an epic space marine. You just bring that out and go, right, one side's painted up that color, the other side's painted up that color. That's your Imperial Navy in the Horus Heresy done. I would say that. Or I don't know, maybe a Warhammer Quest this year.
Warhammer Quest. It's been a while. Curse City was 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, that was a great release. That was not a good release.
So that's my only concern, is that they might feel like they might be a little cautious about doing Warhammer Quest again, simply because that was a bit messy. Maybe a 40k Warhammer Quest.
I would like to see from Steamforged, if I could do it, I would like to see some new iteration of either Grind, which is the Warjack versus Warjack kind of football game, or Company of Iron, which is no Warjacks, just troops. But maybe there's no space for it in modern with the way Warmachine is. I think maybe Company of Iron didn't work when it first came out because it didn't have War Beasts or Warjacks. But it'd be nice to see something else in the Iron Kingdom setting that is slightly different to that. Allows a different way of exploring the setting with a miniatures game.
Sure. Yeah.
But I don't know what that is yet. And then obviously Trench Crusade, because I'm expecting some blue polystyrene to arrive, and I will be chopping up them into blocks and covering the blocks on the sides with coffee stirrers to make modular trenches.
Cool. That'd be great.
And that'll be great for Warmachine as well. So that's all my plans for I think that's my plans for the year, is just Warmachine, Trench Crusade, and I think kind of like Necromunda and tiny 40k, tiny Legions Imperialis. And you've got Old World. So I'm really keen to see hear how that goes.
Yeah. I hope it's good. Actually, so I know we're about to end the episode, but I played 40k 10th edition, and then like a couple days later I was like, oh yeah, I want to play that again. I played the Old World last March, something like that, and I was not really that amped to play it again. But I think that was kind of because of the opponent I was going up against. He was kind of a weird dude. So hopefully the environment of this campaign is a bit more positive. And so far in the Discord, it's been like really cool. People have been really neat. So I think that will definitely help, because at the end of the day, when it comes down to these miniature games and stuff, it's really just about being with cool people, rolling dice, and just seeing what happens. And it doesn't matter too much which game it is.
Yeah. Wicked. Okay. So yeah, that is everything for this episode. So you can contact us at Darker Days Radio. Well, darkerdaysradio@gmail.com, at Darker Days Radio on pretty much every social media. We have a Blue Sky. I think we'll try and start using that a lot more as social media platforms implode and so forth. We decamp from the evil ones. We've got still some episodes from Gen Con to go out, some panels that were recorded by Crystal.
That's what I've heard. There's also a Sasquatch episode for Darker Days, which I need to edit and get out the door. So maybe that'll be this coming week.
Yeah, I am what? I am putting. I need complete show notes for the next Dark Iron, which will cover the Nightmare Empire of Crix, and what that is and why Crix is a fun place to role play and explore for Iron Kingdom's Requiem. And then we still need to do some deep dives, and it's just an organizational thing. I know we've had suggestions of also Blades in the Dark and some other systems. So we will try and arrange things for that. And like I say, there are events coming up, so there will be pictures taken, maybe some interviews recorded, depending upon what we can do, and other things are in the works, which I can't announce. So I think that is everything for now. Cool. Well, thank you again, Mike, for taking time to chat shit about war games. And thank you for listening, everyone, and goodbye for now.
Stay safe out there.